Hello and welcome to another episode of the Amplify Bible Study. I am so happy you have joined us today. It is almost Thanksgiving. Yes, when this show is released, it'll be on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So I hope you have a great time with your families and friends out there over the holiday weekend. And remember, always be thankful for those blessings that God has given to you in your life. We're going through a crazy time of the year, and this is a great time, I think, to reflect on those blessings that we have. So as you're together around the family table, out with your friends, whatever you might be doing, remember always to thank God for those blessings that you have in your life. We are going to continue today our study of the book of Numbers as we look at the, I guess you could say, final oracle from Balaam here in Numbers chapter 24. And actually, this is like the ultimate mic drop he gives to Balak here. Because remember what we talked about last week. Balaam delivers that third oracle, and Balak is furious, and he says, you know what? I was going to give you everything. I had a blank check written for you, and I was ready to go and give you whatever you wanted, and now all that's gone because you refused to go against what God says. And Balaam just kind of says, okay, you know what? I'm going to leave. I'm going to do what you asked me to. I'm going to go ahead and leave, but before I leave, I want to tell you one last thing that God told me to tell you. And that's what we're going to look at today. So go ahead and open your Bibles up to Numbers. We're going to be in chapter 24, and we're going to start at verse number 15. I'll be using the CSB translation today, so it might be a little bit different than what your translation says, but I believe the message will be the same no matter what translation you are using. So let's go ahead and dive in. Verse 15. Then he proclaimed his poem. This is Balaam saying, this is the other thing God told me to tell you. He says, the oracles of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of a man whose eyes are opened. And stop right there. Stop right there for 1 second because I love this. The oracle of a man whose eyes are opened. In other words, he's saying, I know God now, right? I can see what God has planned for you, and my eyes have been opened by God. Now, does he actually get saved or not? We're not sure. It's questionable. We're not sure. But what he's telling Balak is, my eyes have been opened to what God's plans are. The oracle of one who hears the sayings of God and has knowledge from the Most High, and who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls into a trance with his eyes uncovered. Once again, all of that is saying, everything I'm about to tell you is coming from God. Everything I'm about to tell you is coming from God. Everything you're about to hear me say, everything that I have been saying, and everything you're about to hear me say is from God. Look what he says. You know, the oracle, the one who hears the sayings of God. He hears God. He has knowledge of God. He sees God. He understands the ramifications and the weight of what he's about to say. And then he starts with verse 17. I see him, but not now. I perceive him, but not near. A star will come from Jacob, and a scepter will rise from Israel. Now remember, the entire point of this section we're looking at is what? Balak wanted Balaam to come and curse Israel because he was afraid of them militarily, that he was going to be overrun by them, so he brought him in to curse them so the Moabites would be able to overtake Israel. Now look at what Balaam is telling him. This is the last thing he's telling Balak here, right? A scepter will arise out of Israel. He will smash the forehead of Moab and strike down all the Shittites. Wow. That's kind of almost exactly the opposite of what Balak brought him in to do. Edom will become a possession. Seir will become a possession of all its enemies. But Israel will be triumphant. Now imagine just Balak standing there. You can almost see him getting more and more frustrated, more and more irritated as Balaam is pronouncing this. Because he's already told Balaam, go, leave, don't say anything else, please, shut up. And look at what he says, Israel will be triumphant. One who comes from Jacob will, and he will destroy the city's survivors. And then Balak saw Amalek and proclaimed his poem. Amalek was the first among the nations, but his future is destruction. He was the first one to rise up, but now he will be destroyed. Next, he saw the Kenites and proclaimed this poem. Your dwelling place is enduring. Your nest is set in the cliffs. They were mountain people, right? Cain will be destroyed when Ashur takes you captive. Once more he proclaimed his poem. Ah, who can live when God does this? Ships will come from the coast of Kiddaman. They will carry out raids against Ashur and Eber. But they too will come to destruction. He is naming all these places of all these leaders that are standing around listening to him. Because remember, it is not just Balak that's listening to him. It is all these other leaders of all these places he is naming that is listening to what is being said. Balaam then arose and went back to his homeland, and Balak also went his way. So like I said, this is the ultimate mic drop here. Let's go back and look at what he says, right? He starts naming all of these places, all of these things that are going to be overtaken, that are going to be destroyed, that are going to be just completely wiped out. And who's he say will do it? Look at who he says will do it. Israel, Israel, Israel. Israel will be the scepter. Israel will be the overtaker. What he's telling Balak is, I warned you multiple times to not do this. I warned you over and over and over again to not have me put a curse on Israel, because I told you from the beginning that I could not do what God would not allow me to do. And I could not curse what God has blessed. I told you this from the start. And you kept on driving it home for me to do it. And now, even after the final warning I gave you and told you not to do it, when you still insist on me to do it, now I'm going to tell you what is going to happen because you would not listen to what I had to tell you. And look at what he lays out here. It is the destruction of every single kingdom that is standing there with Balak. He lays out and says, God has told me, God has opened my eyes, God has given me the knowledge, God has given me what to say, and he is telling you this is about to happen. It doesn't give a timeline, it doesn't say when it's going to happen, it just says this is what your all's fate is. So how can we take this and apply it to us today? Because that is one of the things we want to do when we are studying God's Word, is we want to look at these passages and say, how can we apply this to us today? How can something that happened 3,000 years ago be applied to our life today? Well, I'm going to ask you this. Has God been giving you warnings? Has God been tugging at you saying, I've told you to not do this? Has God been saying you need to do what I'm telling you to do? You need to say the words that I'm telling you to say when you're around somebody who's lost? You need to say the things that I'm telling you to say when you get into a discussion with somebody? And are you ignoring those warnings? Are you ignoring those things? Because if you are, there's a judgment coming for you. Not a heaven and hell judgment, but you're going to be held accountable for not listening to what God tells you, for not following through with the warnings that God has given you. See, this case here, 3 times they have been warned. 3 times these rulers had been told, don't do this. 3 times they have been said, this is a bad idea. And they didn't listen to any of those warnings from God. How many warnings are you going to get before you start listening to God? How many times is God going to have to say, stop doing this, before you start listening to him? And if you keep on doing it, Remember, here's the whole list of destructive things that are going to happen to these nations. What's going to happen in your life for God to get your attention? What's going to happen in your life for God for you to finally realize, oh, I need to stop doing this? That's what I want you to think about as we go into this Thanksgiving week. Not just the blessings that God has been giving you, not just those good things that he's been giving you, but look at the things in your life that God is tugging at you to stop doing. Look at those things in your life that God has continually said, you need to stop. You need to stop. Balaam gave Balak 3 warnings. God, you don't do this. You need to stop having me do this. And he never once listened. And look at what was proclaimed at the end. That's what I want you to think about when we leave this passage. What is the things in your life that God is urging you, pleading with you to stop, that you're just not listening to right now? Guys, thank you so much for being along on this journey as we go through the book of Numbers. We got a little ways to go, but I also want to remind you that as soon as we finish up the book of Numbers, we are going to be jumping into that book, Search the Scriptures, that 3-year devotional, and we're going to be going to a daily format when we start going to that. So I cannot wait to do that. And until next time, everybody, Amplify Bible Study. Check out the website. It has the latest studies, so this study will be up on Wednesday, but it also has the links to all of our social media and also to all of the ways you can listen to the show through a podcast format. Until next time, everybody, go join the private Facebook group. The link is right there on the website, and that's where our discussions happen. That's where those things that we want to talk about occur, is in that private Facebook group. And I'll see you again next week. Have a great week, everybody.